Teaching and Learning Methods 2. This is the second part, continuing on from the previous week where we discussed teaching and learning methods. So by the end of this pre-recorded lecture, you'll be able to understand Mooston's spectrum of teaching styles and analyse Mooston's spectrum of teaching styles also. There will be a series of video clips to help you with your learning online, where I want you to gain an understanding of the strengths and the weaknesses of each of those methods. We often think too much about effective methods of teaching, what we're doing as the teacher or the facilitator. We need to think more about what's the best method for our learners or pupils, whatever we refer to them as, in our classes. So what is the most effective method of learning? So when we're teaching, there is this old saying, I hear and I forget, I see and I believe, and I do and I understand. So let's just think about how we could apply this. So when you're in a lecture, and I know that I am kind of doing a pre-recorded one right now, people tend to forget what you might hear in a conversation. If you see something, for example, if you're observing a class, or a lesson in a school, that really might help your understanding of some theory that has been discussed. But if you're actually delivering the lesson yourself, so you have a better understanding. So it's always worth just thinking about this simple saying, is that it really can help you think about what's important for the learners and what they need to happen and do and what's most effective. To try and get them practical, try and get them doing stuff, get them out there dribbling those basketballs rather than just listening to you talking. Often when I work with you in your practical lessons, I'm always encouraging you to be as active as possible. So this week I want to pick up from the reading that I've given you to do over the last 2 weeks and talk about the extraordinary work of Musca Mooston. I'm not sure I pronounced that 100% correctly, so do accept my apologies if I have got that wrong. So to talk a little bit about Musca, he was an only child and he was born nearly 100 years ago, and he passed away in 1994, but his work is still very significant today. And we're going to explain and explore why that is. And his work is still talked about now, even nearly 30 years after his death. So it had a significant part to play in, how we teach our lessons as we do now. So Musca, he was born in Israel in 1925, which was part of Palestine at the time. And he was from an immigrant Russian family then, which were from Kiev, which I think was part of the Soviet Union then, which is now part of Ukraine. So as a young boy, I think that it's important to talk about his upbringing. So he had a wide variety of interests. So he played football, he played the violin, he was a gymnast. He also did the decathlon, he also rode horses, and apparently he was very much very charming, but also he loved a prank as well. He was very competent and skilled in whatever he did, and he always used to say there is no impossible, so very positive outtake. So I thought it was important just to give a little bit of background on what he was like as an individual, because I think that can help shape our thoughts on an individual. So he then went on to university and was awarded a doctorate at a later stage, and then he was also awarded an honorary doctorate. He chaired departments of PE at different universities all around the world, and interestingly, he was also worked for CBS, which is the American TV channel in New York, for 7 years, where he had a television program on there, which was talking about getting people in America fit and part of their Shape Up program. Okay. So interestingly, if you're just typing in teaching physical education, Mooston and Ashworth, you will find the book really easy. You can download it and it doesn't cost. So this book has been gifted, I guess, to the PE world, and as a free resource that's given out to try and help shape teaching of PE, something that Musker was very passionate about. So when we go on, so Muston's and Ashworth's spectrum of teaching style is a unifying theory of teaching. So it's trying to bring lots of ideas together in a single attempt to be united. So we often hear terms, for example, of learning styles, teaching styles, learning strategies, teaching strategies, and it can be really confusing. So we just try to group them all together and put them into different categories. So it's about how we organise our lessons. So in simple terms, we have some activities which are real command-led, and we talked about some of these last week, and we have some activities which are more student-led or pupil-led. So one could be in PE, following what the teacher's doing. For example, I demonstrate and then you copy what I've done. Or alternatively, it could be you giving children a ball and just letting them go and do something with it. So one is giving them more freedom and one is less freedom. Okay, so there are other theories available, I should say, but this is the one that we're going to focus on today. So moving on. So in Muston's work, I think it's important to talk about the benefits of universal teaching. So in his work, he doesn't suggest that one method is better than the other, but we have a variety, a paradigm. So that would be one more organised by the teacher and one less organised by the teacher. It's a spectrum. We range from one end to the other, but this shapes all teaching. And I'm going to move on to this on the next slide, but just really important to think about is he's not suggesting one is more important than the other. It's more about getting the most appropriate style or approach for what the pupils are trying to learn. So it's getting the right one. Okay, and when we So firstly, we're going to talk about the versus approach, then the role of idiosyncrasies, and the inconsistent use of terminology. Some of these we've touched upon already, but if we talk about what Muston discovered, the ideas in education are generally presented in opposition to the status quo. So for example, when we're looking at the theory of teaching and learning, pedagogy, is we've got different theories that are often put versus each other. So we've got the cognitive movement against the affective movement, direct instruction versus indirect instruction. We have humanist theories, which are often pitted against behavioural theories. And to put that in more simple terms is, what people say is the purpose of PE. Some people will say it's to learn games. Some people will say it's to have recreation or physical activity or fitness or sports. PEs often have this versus approach. Also, it talks about within teaching, we often have certain fads that come along, or political interventions, or short-lived movements. So it's often creating this, tug of war situation. There's fragmentation and separation, and things happen for a short period of time, which can be really confusing. But the versus approach is suggesting that one is not better than the other. We should try and think about what's best for the learning for those pupils. So then we move on to the role of idiosyncrasies, and this can become a little bit confusing. So as a teacher, each teacher has their own favoured approaches. So this could be So this could be a teacher using, maybe they favour a lecturing style in their approach, or they favour a games-based approach for the pupils. But for example, if we just talk about games-based approach, that might not allow everyone the opportunity to participate. It might be the best approach, but we need to do what's best for those pupils in the class, not what the teacher wants to do, what's best for the pupils. So, really moving away from what you like doing, it's about what they want to do. So having the right educational approach. So do we let them do some self-teaching, or do we lead by command? Do we allow practice? Do we do some guided discovery? So all important things to think about. So the inconsistent use of terminology. So I've spoken about that just a little bit earlier, but just to recap on that, he often found there is a lack of conceptual agreement, or there's a variability in meanings of terms, and it can be really confusing about the different methods that we have of teaching styles, learning approaches, all of these different terms. So he's tried to group them all together into one. So the versus approach, one method is not better than the other. We should do what's best for learning, the role of idiosyncrasies for the pupils, and we're going to use this teaching styles are going to be the terms that we use. So other things to mention about this is, it gives us a whole range of opportunities and different methods, different teaching styles. And Muston's work identifies unique objectives of each option, and you need to think about the decisions that you're going to make in your teaching, what's the best approach to take. So you might become a big fan of reciprocal learning, which is largely teacher-led, but the pupils do have some input. But is that the best method for your activities? Now, just want to say that you remember it is important you do watch the individual short videos. They're going to explain the individual teaching styles for you. So just to remind you, not promoting one activity over the others. Okay, so looking at the options that Muston and Ashworth have come up with here, we've got a variety of teaching style methods within the work. Okay, so we've got command-led, which could be you as a teacher saying copy me and repeating back what they're doing. It could be you giving some instructions. Would make sense to have command-led stuff when we're talking about something that could be risky or dangerous. So it has its place. It's important. Whereas the opposite of that could be when we're getting them to learn something themselves. So you could say, go off, make your own dance routine or a series of activities. You wouldn't do self-teaching for swimming, obviously. And then in the middle, we've got these different discovery activities, which the teacher kind of sets in simple terms, and you're allowing them the opportunity to go off and do those. So just want to go through these quite quickly and just think to really to get you thinking really. So in our lessons, we want to have certain characteristics, and we want our learners to be experiencing learner-centered approaches where they have personalised instruction, so you really get to know them. We also want to get our students producing as producers, so they're learning how to produce rather than being passive. We want them to learn new technologies. That's important for their future. And also, we need to think about from our grandparents' day is, you could create a video now and that is global straight away. So that's interesting to think about when you're doing your teaching. How can I make sure this goes global? Don't always have to do that, obviously, but there is an opportunity there. Is you can experience firsthand other cultures, languages, etc., and communicate directly to different people around the world. We can also use smartphones. Interesting discussion, this one. Should they be in classrooms, should they not? I'm not going to get into that right now, but they certainly can help learning. Also, they could hinder learning, but taking advantage of technology would help. There are other ways we could do. We can start to use blogs. We can go digital. It's important we collaborate and we learn to work as a team. We can use things like Twitter chat. And it's important that people learn how to connect with other people. Okay. So moving on. So number 11, project-based learning. So it's important that our pupils in the 21st century have activities that are authentic and actually kind of recreate what is available. So students should develop their own research, create projects, etc. So it's important they start thinking about something that's worthwhile, using devices that could already be in their hands, and the teacher only guides them. We then need to also encourage have our pupils to think about developing their own positive digital footprint. Key word there being positive, so it's really easy to create a footprint that is not positive. Pupils in primary schools now learn how to code, which is really important. So can we get them to use the HTML? Some people will love this, others might find it more challenging, but it's a great thing to get them to do. Number 14 is not showing here, but the thing that's missing here is being innovative in our teaching there. We no longer just need to use the textbooks. There are TED Talks that we could easily go to help bring that learning alive. And also it's important that we get our learners to keep learning all the time. Okay. So we did look at this slide earlier, and I just want to return to it for very briefly. So, the spectrum of teaching styles is a unifying theory trying to bring together all of those various different methods and categorizing them between A and K. Which was looking at the different options available there and the decision-making process. Okay, and as I said earlier, there are other theories that exist, but this one is probably one of the most significant we've got. Now, I want to move away very slightly from Muston and Ashworth's work at the moment, and just highlight some real characteristics of 21st teaching, and just talk about 15 different approaches. Okay. So looking at this diagram here, which I've taken directly from the work of Muston and Ashworth, okay, is when we were teaching, you will always make a series of decisions. And there's usually a chain of decisions that we have. So we've got, we think about what am I going to do next in my lesson. So it's kind of the pre-impact stage. So you're thinking about what it is. And then you kind of need to see how it goes, so that impact. And then you need to think yourself, oh, did that work? Okay, so we often talk about planning and reflection and being really important parts of lessons. So any decisions you make are obviously going to be effective. You need to give that some careful thought to make sure it is learner appropriate, best for them to learn. Now, if we move down the diagram here and below my red line is... Okay, I'm just going to try and highlight this. Here, where the green is, we've got our different spectrum teaching styles. Okay, so they're all labeled there across the bottom. So we know that A is command and K is self-teach. We know that command is really teacher-led, so it's maximum there by the teacher. And we know that the one at K at the other end is more learner-led. Okay, so we can just see who makes the decision of what's happening in the lesson. And this is just an illustration of that. So it's fairly simple, but it can be a little tricky to understand. But we've just got the range from one to the other, the paradigm. Okay, so just as we start to wrap up here, what this short lecture has attempted to do today is get you to start to understand that there is a variety of teaching styles that we can use, and I've tried to introduce you to Muston and his brilliant work, who comes up with a different variety of methods. We also looked at that one method is not better than the other, so that the versus approach, so it's important we select correctly. It's also, you think about the role of idiosyncrasies. So you do what's best for them, that being the learners, rather than what is best for yourself. And also the advantage of this theory is it really helps avoid that inconsistent use of terminology by grouping into certain areas. Okay, so it's important you watch the individual YouTube videos as well when you have the opportunity. I look forward to seeing you all soon.